Can you all see my screen?
We can see on your screen, yes.
Okay, perfect. So start off. So as Priya mentioned before, my name is Molik and I'm a first year medical student at Imperial College London. For my A levels, I achieved 3 A stars in maths, biology, and chemistry, as well as an A in computer science, which was my fourth A level. And I received offers from 3 other medical students, which were Bristol, Southampton, and King's College London, as well as my fifth option, which is Bristol Biomed. Now, to start off with, I know many of you will still be in the middle of your medical school application process, potentially going through interviews right now or something else. And while I understand that A-level revision might be something which could be secondary right now, something you're putting aside, I think it's something which I also did, and I also decided to uh put to one side while I focused on interviews or at the time exams such as the BMAT and UCAT. And while this did help me achieve higher scores in interviews and my entrance exams, it kind of hindered me from achieving the grades which I wanted, and I had to work even harder towards the end to be able to achieve said grades because I hadn't put as much focus into it before. Many people, especially this year, receive offers for medicine and don't actually meet them in the end. So being able to actually put focus on A levels and not treat it as something which is easier or secondary to the actual medical school application is something which is really important. It's quite easy to burn out, and with all the work which is involved in the medical school application process, being able to actually focus on your A levels towards the end and be able to jump over that final hurdle is something which is really important and something which I don't think is does not have enough focus into it right now. So the way this is gonna work is I'm gonna focus on planning and maths while Enzo will focus on the two science subjects, biology and chemistry. But I think we'll both have quite a decent variety of tips which can apply to not only those three subjects, but also many other subjects as a whole. As I know many of you will be not only be doing the 3 A levels, which we're talking about, but many other extra ones. So in terms of planning, it's not something which applies to everyone really, but for starters, I don't think it has to be super complicated. You can uh have plans which are simple, such as I'm gonna wake up, do a bit of maths revision for an hour, and then after that do some biology. You don't have to plan the specific topic, the specific time, or anything. You just it's just sometimes good to have a plan, but equally you may be able to revise without a plan at all. I personally, towards the start, did not have any sort of plans at all, and I just decided to revise what I was feeling, revise the topics which I found hard at the time, and that's something which really worked for me. However, towards the end, during my study leave, where I had to cover all the different topics and be prepared for my different papers, which were in quick succession with each other, I had to create plans where I'd specifically revise for different topics on different days, just so I knew all the topics I needed to for the exams at the right time. Now, you have to make sure your plans are flexible, and this means you're not always going to be able to stick to them. I know many times before where I've had to change my plans for revision at last second due to unexpected circumstances, such as having to go out or feeling quite burnt out, where I would have to take a break even when I didn't need to. Being able to have a flexible plan is quite important because it means that you're able to um moving on to my second point or my third point, be realistic and be able to understand the limits of your revision competency and try and how do I phrase this? Try and make sure that you're revising the best way possible because if you're sticking exactly to your plan, it may mean that certain topics don't get covered, or you may cover topics in a worse way if you're not taking enough breaks. Now, talking about breaks, it's something which people might not realize is important, but revising in succession for a long period of time is something which obviously won't help you. After 30 minutes to an hour, you won't really accomplish much from revising further because your brain will just be somewhere else. It'll be tired, and you need to put focus into something, into another topic or another idea so that you're able to um put the best possible focus into each and every topic and revise to the best of your ability. The way I did it was that just have a break whenever I really felt like it. If I felt like I wasn't focusing as much anymore, or I wasn't understanding the topic, and it'd been a decent amount of time, such as 30 minutes, I'd take a quick break where I'd go outside, potentially go to the gym, or go on my phone for a bit, just so I could take my mind off the revision and think about something else. And my final point, I kind of touched on it before, but make sure you're not just focusing on one thing a day. If you focus on one thing every single day, you'll forget it after a while. And being able to balance out multiple topics means that you're not only covering more and different subjects, but you're also able to remember it more in the long term because there's the smaller amount of content which is more easy and more feasible to remember in the long term. Now, on to maths as a specific subject. It's all about practice at the end of the day. Once you actually understand the concepts and how to answer the questions, you just have to keep on practicing and keep on getting those key ideas back into your head through practice questions. I think some of the places which I found best to learn the content and actually find questions was Save My Exams in TL Maths for actually understanding the concepts, and Madass Maths, Maths Genie, or other Google searches for actual questions and question banks. Your school may provide resources for these sort of things, so make sure to use them if they work for you. Now, I think in terms of actually understanding the pure concepts, many people will try and memorize ideas and not actually understand the mathematical sort of ideas behind everything. If I had to give an example, I'd talk about trig graphs, where trig graphs are something, or trigonometry graphs are something which apply to many different questions within that topic, and it's something you have to use constantly. But there's also ways of being able to memorize the intervals within trig graphs. For example, sine and cos are 360-degree periodic. So once you find a solution for a sine or cos equation, you can just add 360 to find another solution as long as it's within the range. And while this works for simpler questions, as you get to more complicated ideas and find those higher mark questions towards the end of the paper, using the simple interval which you memorized isn't going to cut it anymore. You need to be able to understand the concept and understand how to draw those trig graphs and remember them so that you can use those intervals constantly. I personally tried to use that interval method towards the start, and while it worked quite well for me throughout, by the time I think it was halfway through year 13, it just didn't cut it anymore, and it just I just had to learn the trig graph method because it's something which works for everyone. Now, something I've wrote here is that you have to make sure to revise according to your exam board and notice trends in common question styles. That relates to the specification, which is something I'll touch on a bit later, but many different all the different exam boards have different styles of questions and have different actual topics which they cover. So by checking your specification, you'll be able to understand what you need to know and what you don't need to know. If you go online to these different websites, they'll have great questions, but they might not be like your exam board ones. So being able to ask your teachers or use the resources provided by the exam boards is something which I'd recommend personally, as it just really helps in the end. Analyzing the trends in the common question styles will help you by your final exam, as for my own personal exam board, OCRA, they started with simple one-mark questions such as simple differentiation, and gradually the question would increase in difficulty over time, where we'd have that really complicated question towards the end. Being able to understand that and being able to pace myself during the exam accordingly was something which was really helped by understanding those trends in the questions, the trends in the papers. Now, moving on from subject-specific advice, let's talk about revision in general. Find the right methods for you. While I've talked about the methods which worked for me before and have worked for other people, they might not work for you either. And if something's working for you right now, stick with it, honestly. If you're able to understand everything clearly and it's worked consistently again and again, I think it's worth it just to keep on going with those sort of revision methods. As everyone's different, everyone processes information differently. And um if you can understand it all correctly, then the method's good for you and there's no reason to change it. Make sure to pace yourself. many people have compared the A-level period to a marathon rather than a sprint. So being able to constantly understand that you don't you don't need to revise everything in one day, and you should be able to space out over a long period of time and understand different pieces of content over this piece of time over this period of time is something which will help you avoid burnout and also help you remember stuff in the long term. Because if you revise everything one day and take a 1 week break, you'll forget all the next week. There's no point working like that. You just need to be able to constantly revise stuff over different days, and that will really help you over the long period of time, which is the A-level break. Now, I've wrote here about listening in class and not skipping lessons, and I know many people will struggle to understand concepts from the teachers and may find it easier to go online or have their other revision methods. However, I think that even just listening that little bit extra in class can help you when you get home and you try and recover the topic again, because by doing this you'll remember the key words which your teacher mentioned, and you'll remember the key concepts, and that can really help you not only revise it more in depth but revise it quicker, because you'll already understand the small bits of content which you wouldn't have understood if you didn't listen. As I mentioned before, use the specification is something given to you to help, and if you just the quick Google search online, you'll be able to find it easily for your exam board and subject. If your exam board gives you questions outside of your specification, that's their fault, not yours. So make sure you're looking at your spec and revising only what is there, nothing else, unless it's an interest sort of thing, which in that case it's your choice. But yeah, I think specification was one of the most important things for me personally. It's something which I'd go through constantly and tick off to understand to know that I know it already. So and you can use it in conjoinment with past papers, which I'm talking about next. And when you analyze the past paper questions, you can notice how it relates to the spec and how this specific past paper question is talking about this spec point. So you can understand that where spec points may be vague at times and where you may not understand them, this past paper questions can help you understand what they actually mean by it and what you need to learn and what you don't need to learn. When you revise, try and remove any distractions possible. Common one is your phone, but it could be stuff like certain websites which you go on, social media, YouTube, anything. Even even just sound which you can hear from maybe your parents hoovering, something like that. That's all of this counts as distraction, and all of this will mean that you're not revising in an optimal fashion. Sometimes I found it great to go to the library or go to a cafe to revise because it was a bit quieter, or if it wasn't quieter, the noise level was quite constant. So I was able to constantly like filter out that background noise because it didn't change. Unlike my house where I had a younger brother who was quite young, would make a lot of noise, so it was quite difficult for me to revise at times. Now, finally, you may have to make sure you always have those hobbies which you keep on going back to while during your revision period. I encourage you really to not cut any hobbies just because of the stress of A levels and how difficult it is. You should always try and find time for it, especially exercise, which I did by going to the gym, but could be anything, such as playing football, playing sports with your friends, or even just going for a quick walk in the morning. It's something which can really help your mental health and will help you through the period as I mentioned at the end, it helps you avoid burnout, which is one of the most difficult things to deal with at A levels. I'm going to talk about Anki. Anki was something which I constantly used, and for those who don't know about it, it's a flashcard tool which works online and as an app, and it's free to download on everything but Apple devices, I believe, but works perfectly well on computers and Android phones, and costs about £20 on Apple devices, I think. But at the end of the day, it's basically flashcards, and you can find alternatives online or with paper flashcards. And the way you'd use it is you'd use it with more knowledge-based subjects, such as the sciences like biology and chemistry, rather than maths, because there's not really much to memorize there. It's more so actually understand the questions and problem solving. It's important to start as early as possible with Anki. And for those of you in year 13 right now, it might not be feasible for you to actually use Anki because it's not something which can be done over a short period of time. It's something which can be done over, you have to do over a long period of time. So for anyone in year 12, I'd encourage you to try and start making those Anki decks now because it's something which really helped me through my A levels and helped me remember um, all the topics which I hadn't covered in a while because I'd constantly gone through that recall method and constantly had those flashcards popping through my mind so I could remember them over a longer period of time. The hardest part is making the flashcards in the first place, but it does really help you actually understand the concepts because you're typing it out, you're writing it out, and it goes to your brain. You're understanding it while you make those flashcards. So personally, I found it quite a big help, even though it was quite a difficult and lengthy process. Now, if you don't have the time to make them yourselves or you're year 13 and you really want to use Anki, you can find some online or you can ask your friends for decks if they have any. But it's obviously a bit worse because it's not tailored specifically to your needs and may not be tailored to your exam board specific. Past papers are something which you're going to come across eventually and you may have come across already. And something which is really important is that you don't have unlimited past papers. So for some examples, they may be in their first, second years of using a new specification. So you may only have one or two past papers which are actually accurate for your exam board. Being able to know when to complete them and know when to actually use your past papers is really important because if you use them all early now, then you're not gonna have any towards the end where you may be reusing past papers and you may remember questions, which makes the actual process of completing them much worse and much less useful. As I mentioned for maths, analyzing the repeated styles of questions helps to know what to expect. It's not a trick, they will repeat the same sort of stuff every year. While there may be new styles of questions, eventually they will use the same sort of patterns which they've used in previous years. Marking yourself harshly isn't something I did at first, but when I started doing it, I found it really helped me improve in my scores in my past papers, improving the way I was answering questions. At first, I was a bit lenient. I'd look at the mark scheme, say, "Oh, I basically said that. I'll mark myself correct." Then, when I actually went into topic papers in schools, I'd get lower marks than I'd expect. And with that, I decided to mark myself more harshly, and I saw improvement. It just means you're being more strict on yourself, and it means that you're more likely to get that mark in the end, even if you may potentially get it towards the end. Now, make sure to reflect on your mistakes and don't focus on the score you get. The final bit of that is something really important, as many people might get hung up on getting a low score, but at the end of the day, it's a past paper. It doesn't matter really, does it? All that matters is the final paper which you do. So being able to ignore that score, maybe don't even count it up if you don't want to, but rather go through your mistakes and understand why you got it wrong. Did you not understand it? Was your exam technique not good enough? That's something which I think is really important and something you should focus on. Spend time after marking, looking through your questions and understanding why did I get this wrong, and try and improve on that with your revision. And finally, be careful about using those practice questions which you find online from websites such as PMT or others, as many of them derive them from past papers. So if you do those practice questions, they will um they will make your actual experience of doing a past paper much worse, as you may remember the answers from when you did them before. Now, as a timeline, I know some of you will be in year 12 and some of you will be in year 13. So well, it is ideal to do consistent daily revision. I know it's not realistic. I didn't do consistent daily revision even in year 13. And you have to just be able to do it to the best of your ability and do as consistently as you possibly can. I saw topic tests as the way to really go for it because I would decide to count topic tests as a benchmark to see whether I should revise more or less. So I put focus into the topic tests and revised when they came up. So I'd understand whether I understood the topics or not. And if I didn't, I'd go back to them and revise them again. As I mentioned before, Anki is a really good way of revising older content while covering new. And many people seem to forget about older content when they come to the newer concepts, especially in year 13, where the topics are much harder than year 12. It's easier to forget everything from all the easier topics from year 12, which might be easier, but can still be quite difficult to process if you haven't done it recently. And start doing past papers more frequently, 2 to 4 weeks before your actual exam. If you do them before, you might not use them up. But 2 to 4 weeks before, it's a good time in my opinion, and you'll be able to complete them in a good, orderly fashion so that you actually benefit from them in the end. So I basically come to the end now. My email's there if you guys want to ask any questions after towards the end. And try and keep pushing through towards the end. I had a form of motivation in my mind, which was the summer. I couldn't wait to hang out with my friends every day and be able to go out. But for some of you, it may be a holiday. It may be the idea of getting into med school. It may be just the satisfaction of getting those grades. But having some form of motivation in your mind is something which can really help you push through to the end because it's just something which can constantly linger in your head and make you tell yourself to push yourself that bit extra. And finally, I'd just like to say good luck to everyone completing it this year or next year, and just do your best in the end. Thank you. I think I'll hand over to Enzo now, who will be doing the next set of subjects.
So I'll be covering biology and chemistry. Let me just put that. So hi, I'm Enzo. I'm a medical student at Bucks, and I got 3 stars in maths, biology, and chemistry. So first, biology. So I'll say for the marks, it's around 40% factory recall, 40% application knowledge, and 20% for skills. And keeping this in mind, it's really important that at first you learn the steps, so you learn facts, and then you practice pushes on the topic, so you practice applying the knowledge, and then you do past papers. In my personal opinion, I think it's step first two steps, you're limited to the marking. So to learn the spec, I personally use flashcards, and I also use Anki. And when I was making these Ankis, I would literally just have the spec on the side and actually follow the every single spec point. And the reason why I feel Anki very effective is the graph on the left, also notice you've probably seen it before. It's just a good way to kind of constantly review your knowledge and it improves your memory retention. But if you do something that's been working, it's quite late in the exam cycle, so don't do it on these changes. So after you need the knowledge, you need to know how to apply it. We all know by now how important exam technique is in biology. Even if you know the knowledge, if you don't hit the marking points, you're limited to what you do. And I think that's why it's really important you do questions by topic until you know the topic. Because if you just move on to the papers, you won't really know which topics like marking schemes. And try and use old spec questions by topic article like I did questions by topic on the old spec, which is really useful. So it meant that you didn't questions weren't spot for you. And I also when I went through these questions by topic, I wrote down the question I got wrong in the mark scheme. I did again on Anki, you can do some words, some other things. It just means that from time to time you can remind yourself of the questions you often get wrong or the month scheme. And on the morning of the exam, I would just scan through these decks and remind myself of the key marking points. And then after a while, you spot these there's some set questions that you repeat every year, they just word slightly differently. And it's really useful to just kind of spot these. And with these past papers, you're going to be careful who you're using. That's why having a good plan is important. So that means you can space them out, say them in the lead up to exams. As I said, spot the questions that come in any time. The more papers you do, you'll spot them. One thing that I did that I found quite useful was making a spreadsheet so you can keep track of the papers you've done and mark you can kind of make notes on the paper, like what question you got wrong or what you struggled with. There's something really important that I didn't do in the beginning when I did these past papers and I invested. You're trying to enhance the conditions. So don't think it's very nearby, don't in the time, don't uninterrupted. And then as Mike said, mark it as strictly as possible. Especially biology because you don't have certain particular words that mark the point. And then if you think, oh, in the real exam, I'll write it down to give myself a mark. You're not really remembering what you should have written. So it's better to get the worst mark when it's in the papers, and you get in the end than being lenient to yourself. And then because we're limited, I think we should probably do learn this stuff and
Hi,
we
Enzo. Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just moving closer to the mic? I think I have some people having issues. They're unable to hear you.
okay, so should I go back?
Yeah, just carry on from where you were. It's just people were, um, so carry on from where you are, but people were just having
Sure.
issues hearing.
Let me see if I can change anything. Better?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
should be
sorry
fine.
about that. Yeah. Um, Another thing is as exams get closer, don't just do the papers at the beginning. Do the papers that are later date from time to time so you don't forget the content. This is another reason why Anki is quite useful. You can just do the Anki deck to remind yourself of the content. Now I'll be moving on to chemistry, um, which is quite a similar formula to biology. I might be repeating a couple of the same things, but it's the same thing. Just learn the spec and then do the topic by questions and then do the past papers. I personally use flashcards to learn the spec, but I just basically, if you've got a revision strategy, that means that you know the topic, just keep on doing that. Once you've understood and learned the content, practice applying it by doing questions by topic. And one thing with chemistry, you got to know your reagents and conditions and the colors or reactions really well. When like that diagram question comes up, you just got to be able to do it instantly without really thinking, and without wasting time. And these should be 3 marks when they come up in the real exam. Um, Again, plan your papers out. You've got a limited number of current spec papers. You can use old spec papers, but keep in mind the different specification. Um, and with chemistry, again, they have a certain type of questions every year, and the more papers you do, you'll spot them. This is applied especially to calculations. They have the same type of big calculation questions, and if you know how to do them really well, they're just 3 marks. So just you should get to a point where you don't really need to think about what you're doing, and it's really slick. And you do the question, you make sure you got the right units, you make sure you've shown all your working, and and then yeah, the calculation should be 3 marks at the end of the revision. And then I also noted down the questions I got wrong. I used Anki for this. This is yeah, just means the same thing. In the morning of the exam, I just went through the deck to remind myself. Personally, I found chemistry more time pressured, so it's even more important that I did them under exam conditions and timed them. Because what I found was when I was practicing, I'd have a lot of time at the end, but in the real exam, with the exam pressure, I would spend more time on the question, and especially for biology, I found that I had a lot less time than I had when I practiced. And then for examples like OCR, we really can't afford to lose silly marks. For my year, it was 90% for an A star. Um, so you're gonna make like you gotta be slick and you gotta practice so you don't lose marks on these like just units or just simple things. Finally, I hope mocks went well for you, but if they didn't, don't lose hope. I got 2 Bs and an A in the mocks and then 3 A stars in the real A levels. A lot of schools, including my school, made mocks really hard. So don't be discouraged if you got a bad mark. But don't think you can get away by cramming. Like if you did badly like me, it's like the final wake up call. If you don't put your head down now and don't do the work, like you just won't be able to get a good mark. But if you do the work, and just do a consistent amount of work, you can really improve your grade. So good luck, and the work you do now will pay off. You have a whole summer to look forward to, and whatever happens to your medical application, if you have strong A levels, if you have to reapply, you'll be in a really good position. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me. I'm sorry about the